Hey everybody, welcome. We are just 14 hours. No, that's not true. I was gonna say, because usually the exam's in the morning. So we got a little bit more time. We got 18 hours to go until the AP exam tomorrow. So it is the night before. So welcome back. We have 2 live reviews left. So we're gonna do this one right now is Unit 5. So we're gonna be talking about linkage institutions, political parties, elections, interest groups, and the news media. And then if you come back and join me again at 8 p.m., we're going to do FRQ stuff. And with the FRQ one, we'll do the FRQs. I'll go over the task verbs. I'm going to give you a great strategy if maybe FRQs aren't your strong point and you're looking for, all right, what's the best way to attack these? What points are easier or tougher? Scoring. And I'll answer as many questions as I possibly can in that one. So we might hang out for a little bit on that second one tonight. This first one, we're going to kind of go through Unit 5. As always, I'll looking towards the chat and try to help you guys out whenever possible, see if there's things that maybe need clarifying, but I'm going to stick to the Unit 5 content in this one. So again, I do just want to say thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I appreciate it. I hope that so far the lives, we've done 4 already. I hope that they have been helpful. And I hope that the videos, all the unit review videos, the documents, the cases, the speed reviews, this is probably where we are at this point. Again, if you need more specific content, maybe if there's some vocab that you're hearing tonight that you're like, I don't really remember that, you can go back and look for those specific videos in Unit 5 because I have the ones that are more detailed as well as your broad overviews. All right, so with all that said, again, if you want to help me out and you want to smash that like button, I always appreciate that so much. So again, welcome to everybody that's here right now. Okay, so again, I see lots of people saying hi in the chat, so that is awesome. Welcome back. I see Ms. King Skinner, aka Vicky. So welcome to you. You have been very popular. I've seen in the chat a couple times. So just want to do that. And Mr. Blythe as well. Okay. And yeah, Alina, it's a good idea. We can do some FRQ predictions. I really need to remember to think about that so I can make an informed prediction before we get out of here on our 8 o'clock live review. All right, so we're going to start off with our 4 models of voting behavior. So again, if you want to throw one of those in the chat, you are welcome to do so. Let me know in the chat, what are our 4 models of voting behavior? In other words, what we're talking about is how do people make their decision of which candidate to vote for? And so we have 4 kind of explainers. Now, before I put those up on the screen, we can also talk about some other things, right? Demographics matter. So we do have some demographic patterns of people voting for, first of all, who's more likely to vote or less likely to vote. But we also have predictors like partisan identification and things like that that affect it. I see lots of prospective. I see some retrospective. Whoa, Lil Bincy got all 4 of them. Just drop all of them like that quick. That's very nice. Ray, same thing. There's Vodka Drinkinski again with all 4 of them. Kalion, sorry if I got that wrong. Kalon Ram. Also Amelia, very nice to everybody who got all of those or any of those. Like I said, you guys are going to do amazing tomorrow. I hope you're not stressing at this point. I hope that if anything that these live reviews are showing how much you know, and you should be walking in there, I hope, very, very confidently tomorrow with your head up, chest out, ready to go, because you guys are going to kill it. All right, so we can start off with rational choice voting. I don't know why I have that one first. That's not the one I usually start with. But rational choice, the person is thinking about himself or herself. So this isn't looking big picture for the country. It's not really an ideological form of voting. It's not a partisan way of voting. This person says, I think that candidate's policies will be better for me personally. That's what we're looking at with rational choice. And so could that person vote for a Democrat sometimes and other times vote for a Republican? Yeah, if they're making the promises that person thinks, matter for them. So maybe one year they're like, oh, I need student loan debt forgiveness because I have student loan debt. And they vote for the Democrat that's promising that. Then in a few years, they're starting a small business and they want the tax break that's offered by the Republican candidate, right? So that's rational choice. They're looking at what's best for themselves personally. Then we get to ones that are a little bit more politically based, but again, you have retrospective. A lot of people are going to be retrospective voters. This is just looking at the current and the past. So retro, backwards looking past. So you're kind of saying, all right, am I better off now than I was 4 years ago, right? That's the very famous line from Ronald Reagan back in the 80s. Are you better now than you were 4 years ago? If you are, then you vote for the incumbent. If you're not, if you're pessimistic, you're like, these last few years haven't been so good, then you vote for the new person, the challenger. Again, kind of regardless of what party they are. This is so an example would be like in 2020, people voting for Joe Biden. A lot of people who voted for Biden weren't so much voting for Biden as much as they were voting against Trump, right? And so that would be retrospective voting. In 2024, a lot of people were like, the country's not going in the right direction. They weren't really voting as much for Trump or against Harris as they were against like the Biden-Harris 4 years. That's why you heard Trump and the Republicans always saying about Biden-Harris, right? They could try to connect those two because they knew people weren't happy about that 4 years of his presidency, and so they tagged her to that as much as possible. Prospective is looking forward, so it's saying, all right, which candidate do I prefer to make decisions in the future? So things that the country is likely to face. Maybe it's who do I want nominating Supreme Court justices? Maybe it's if the country was attacked, who would handle that attack better? Who do I want making future decisions? So this is going to be the one that takes kind of the most amount of political information. These would probably be your most informed voters, might be more prospective because they have strong opinions about what will happen in the future and which candidate will handle those issues better. And then you have a very, very easy, simple form of voting, which is called straight ticket voting. You may have noticed, so depending on if you had older exams, they've gone back and forth in this vocab term. They used to call it party line voting for a couple of years, which was annoying because it is straight ticket. We're back to the right term, which is good. But if you were to watch videos from like 4 or 5 years ago, from 2017 to 2021-ish, AP Gov called this party line voting. Party line voting is something else. It happens in Congress, right? Party line voting is when every member of one party, the Democrats, all vote yes on the bill and all the Republicans vote no. That's party line voting, and that's in Congress. Straight ticket is what voters do. So citizens, if they just go and they say, all right, I'm going to vote for all the Democrats. I'm going to vote for all the Republican candidates. I don't even know who they are. It doesn't matter. They have an R next to the name. That means they're good. Or they have a D next to the name. That means they're good. So this is, again, a fairly common form of voting. It's becoming less common. More people are doing what's known as split ticket voting. So they're voting for a Republican for president, a Democrat for their senator, a Democrat for their House position, which again might be surprising because that kind of goes against the idea of party polarization. But we do have these multiple things that are kind of conflicting happening simultaneously, where the people who are strongly Democratic or strongly Republican are really strongly Republican or really strongly Democratic. And again, this is more unit 2, so I don't want to go too far out in this direction. But that's something that has been getting our politics a little bit more divisive, right? More liberal, more conservative, kind of going back and forth between like the extremes of each party. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so those are our 4 models of voting representation or more models of voting behavior, how people choose to vote. We have some amendments. We talked about these last night. We did them really, really quick. We'll do them quickly again. Amendments that have increased opportunities for political participation. We did the 15th, 17th. Actually, we didn't do the 17th last night. Last night we did 15, 19, 24, and 26. So there's 2 others that are on here. So if anybody wants to tell me what in the 17th Amendment, what about the 17th Amendment? How did that increase political participation? 15th says race can't be a barrier to voting. 19th says sex can't be a barrier to voting. 26 says age can't be a barrier to voting of anybody who's at least 18 years of age. And the 24th Amendment banned poll taxes, right? The 14th Amendment is one that College Board specifically added 2 years ago to this section. It's not one that we usually in the past have associated with this, but notice what it says. It doesn't say voting. It says political participation. And so we're thinking of people who were formerly enslaved. They now gain citizenship with the 14th Amendment. And then it says that their equal protection of the law can't be violated, nor can their due process rights be violated. And so that obviously does increase opportunities to participate politically. So this is bigger than just voting, right? I see, looking over into the chat, we do have a lot of people are saying direct election of senators. That is absolutely correct. So I'll ask this follow-up. Prior to the 17th Amendment, how were senators chosen? All right, prior to the 17th Amendment, how were senators chosen? So this is an amendment that we don't talk about a lot in AP Gov, but it is a pretty big moment. Some maybe over dramatically state that this is when the U.S. shifted kind of away from its Republican origins, meaning little r, not the party, but like of being a representative, a republic, more towards a democracy, because now you have another position that people can directly elect. You guys are absolutely right. Lots of people putting in here state legislatures. Ella Charles, Linus plays Roblox. That's a good name. Roberta, Anya, very nice. So yeah, that's what we're seeing, right? We see state legislatures being the ones to do this previously. And so this, again, it alters federalism, right? You used to have people, the whole Senate was worried about their state. And now the senators are worried about, technically their state, they're supposed to be, but they're really worried about the people in their state. They are representing them. And so they're going to be more concerned about public opinion than they would have been prior to the 17th Amendment. Again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's for another discussion. All right, so some things that affect voter turnout. Structural barriers. So anytime you see structural versus informal, structural are going to be like legal things, right? So the way that states run their elections. So we're talking about election laws here, like when are you allowed to vote? How early or late into the day? What if you want to do early voting? So I don't have that one up on the screen, but that's one of them, right? So polling hours, is it just on election day or is it before that? How do you register to vote? Which actually, let me save that one because I'll be the next one of the next slides coming up in just a moment. Yeah, how easy or difficult is it to do mail-in ballots? How easy or difficult is it to do absentee ballots if you're going to be out of state, not home during the election? Political efficacy is a vocab word. And basically what that means is whether a person feels that his or her votes matter, whether they feel like they actually affect things. So a person with a high level of political efficacy is definitely going to vote, but they might also do more than that, right? They might give money to campaigns. They might actually volunteer and go and knock on doors and remind people to vote or tell them why they should vote for their particular candidate. They might do a lot more things to be involved. A person with low political efficacy, they're not likely to do all those other things and be like, it doesn't matter. Our marches, our protests, they don't mean anything. They don't change anything. I'm just one person. It's not worth my time. Who cares if I don't vote, right? And so they're going to be less likely to participate as well. And again, we have the demographics. So if I can ask this for the chat as well, what are some demographic cues or like groups that are more likely to vote? So what kind of things would make a person more likely to vote? And so this is where we do lots of stereotyping of the likelihood of people voting. We're not going to get into that in this section, but you could also look into who's more likely to vote for Democrats, who's more likely to vote for Republicans. I see lots of old people. I see some educated people. That's good. Religious, that's another one. Very, very nice. Calm down, little killer. All right. So yeah, it's educated, older, and I haven't seen this one yet, but higher income. Oh, there we go. Johan has higher income. Very nice. But yeah, so the older person is, again, within reason, but we're thinking middle-aged and up. So like mid-40s to like your 60s, 70s, that's going to be the people most likely to vote, like especially the people in like your 60s, the ones who are retired, but they're not like old yet. You know what I mean? Because I know sometimes people want to hesitate and they're like, well, aren't they too old to vote? Like they don't even, that's like at the end of life. So don't take it to an extreme. All right. When we say older, within reason. All right. Higher income, more likely to vote for sure. The more education a person has, the more likely they are to vote for sure. I'm glad I didn't see much in the way of race on here. I was a little bit worried when I asked that question of what I might see in the chat, but I don't really see too much. In the past, it used to be that white voters were more likely to vote at higher rates than Black voters, Hispanic voters. That's no longer really true. So there's been now a couple of elections where Black voter turnout has been at a higher rate than white voter turnout. Remember, that means as a percentage relative to the group size. It doesn't mean total votes. It means as, again, a relative share. So that one is no longer a good predictor. So then we're left like with the other ones that are. Okay, so Gabe, you got to come stronger than that, man. Come on. All right. The other big last couple things, actually, we have a few more about voter turnout. So another big one is to know states are in charge of federal elections. And the AP exam likes to ask questions about this because just saying that sentence, it sounds like, are you sure about that? States are in charge of federal elections. That is true. It's that way in the Constitution. All right. So the Constitution leaves states to be mostly in charge of federal elections. Now, what are some ways that the federal government has gained more power over elections? The slide that we did earlier, right? All these constitutional amendments, they say that now states, so there's things states can decide, right? So states can decide what are your polling hours going to be. Some states are going to have early voting, some states aren't. Some states are going to have mail-in ballot opportunities, some states aren't, right? So states can make all those decisions, and that totally does affect voter turnout. What states can't do anymore, though, is they can't say women can't vote, or people can't vote based on their race, or people have to be 21 to vote. So they can't do those things. They can't do poll taxes, things like that. So they have been limited in some of the things that they can do. But again, notice there are lots of things and differences that are still allowed. So I just kind of touched on a lot of those. All right, let's see. Just glancing over at the chat, I see a question from Vodka Drunkinsky. Again, one of my favorite names ever. Suppose the federal government created a law about the national voter ID, about national voter ID regulations. Would that be via interstate commerce clause? That's a great question. It's the kind of question that makes me know you're getting a 5 on this exam, to tell you the truth. It would be tough. It would absolutely be challenged, and it would be up to the Supreme Court to decide the legitimacy of that. I think what they would more likely do is, if I was them and I wanted to do that law, I would go equal protection clause. I would go 14th Amendment, and I would make it into states not being able to deny the equal protection of voters. And so that would be my route. This isn't really commerce. Now, I know we've talked about how it doesn't actually have to be commerce anymore. It just have to affect interstate commerce. But when you start talking about voting policies and wanting to make a commerce argument with that, I don't doubt that that would be something that could be suggested. I wouldn't take that particularly seriously. I mean, I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so that probably shouldn't mean very much to you. But I think that equal protection clause would be their best route to go. And you can let me know what you think about that in the chat. All right, last couple things with voter turnout and this sort of thing would be, it's not just about the voting policies, like how you actually get to vote on election day. It's also about the registration policies. So just be careful on an FRQ. We had an FRQ a couple years ago. Some of you might have done the practice one. It was the Taylor Swift FRQ. And it was all about voter registration policies, because those also vary from state to state. And I happened to score that one for College Board. So I remember that one very clearly. I scored like 3,000 of those FRQs. And a lot of people got it wrong, because instead of talking about registration, they were talking about voting. And that's not the same thing. You register to get your names onto the voting polls, or onto the, what's the word for that? But so that you are allowed to, the voting rolls, I should say, not polls, rolls, so that you're allowed to vote. So registration, that's what that's talking about. So some states, you show up on election day and you can register and then vote. Some states automatically register everybody. You turn 18, you are now registered to vote. Just show up on election day. Some states make it more difficult. Some states make it easier. So you can do it online. Just go onto the state's website and you register to vote. Some states make you come in person to register to vote. And then along with that, you end up with, sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought there. Voter registration laws, same day. I don't know what I was gonna say. I read the next thing and it made me lose my mind. That hasn't happened. This is the 5th one of these lives. It's the first time that I kind of forgot where I was on that. So sorry about that, guys. Forgive me for that. Again, just kind of glancing to the chat. I think you guys are just kind of talking about random stuff right now, so we're okay. Voter turnout is highest in presidential elections. And again, we already did that. Political efficacy. We did this one, more educated, higher income. I said this one really fast, but also people who are more religious are more likely to vote people who are non-religious. Whether that continues or not, that is so far has been a trend in the past. And then other things that influence voter choice. So going beyond our retrospective, prospective, rational choice, and straight ticket voting, the candidate themselves, right? Whether people like that person or not, whether they think that person is charismatic or trustworthy or honest or would be good at, has a good business sense or, would make good decisions for the economy, or they have a good vision for the future. So the candidate himself or herself does matter. So that's true. Contemporary political issues. If the economy is doing really badly, whoever's the incumbent is going to have a really hard time winning, right? Like that's just kind of a very, very basic thing. So shout out to Mr. Miller. I saw it at glance. So you're welcome, Kimber. So all these things are going to matter. Demographics, like we said, that matters. We're not going to get into that so much. Again, voters who, and again, the demographics are really weird for this election in 2024. So I don't know how many of you followed that closely, but there were some shifts. And so Trump did surprisingly well with Gen Z, you guys, your age group. He did better than Republicans usually do. And he did better with Black voters, especially Black male voters, than Republicans usually do. He did the best Republicans have done with them as a group in 50 years. And yet, most Black voters, including Black male voters, still vote Democratic. So some of these patterns were a little bit less strong than they typically were in this particular election. All right. Now we kind of get to the big picture for this unit. So that was just really 5.1 and 5.2. Now we get into linkage institutions. That's our overall kind of big vocab term. It's one of those vocab terms that's so broad and it's not specific to one of these four that sometimes it's easy to forget. And I've scored FRQs where the prompt just says to tell how a linkage institution does blah, 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 blah. And it's actually a really easy prompt because it gives you the freedom to choose any of them, right? Parties, elections, interest groups, or the news media. And I can see people fumble that because they're like, wait, what? What's a linkage institution? So I'm aware that that's a thing. So just make sure that's what we're talking about. It's just something that connects people to the government. A link links people on one hand to the government. And so what's that link between people and the government? Well, it can be the political party, it can be the interest groups, it can be the elections, and it can be the news media. So we're going to do those. We're going to start with political parties. All right. So what is the number one main purpose of a political party? I would have put this or asked this to be in the chat, but it's already up on the screen, so it's too late for that. Purpose of political party is to gain power and to win elections. So you have people who have similar ideas about what a government should do. So they might be similar ideologically, but really they're coming together and saying, all right, how do we win and make sure that they don't win? That's what a party does. So that might sound cynical, but that is the purpose of a political party. They want to win. That is more important to them than influencing policy. So when we do interest groups, we're going to say their main purpose is to influence public policy. And it is true that is absolutely also a purpose of political parties. They want to influence policy. But let me ask you this. If you aren't in power, how effective are you going to be at influencing policy, right? And because of that, their main fundamental goal above all else is to gain power by winning elections. All right. So like Green Bike Lane says, you can't influence policy if you don't win. And so they're going to put winning above all else. Now, you see the secondary there. Now, how do they do that? So then, again, just on multiple choice questions, especially, make sure you can distinguish between the purpose, gain power, win elections, and the functions. So what are things that parties do in order to gain power to win elections? So I'll ask that, and you guys can throw those answers into the chat. I flashed it up on the screen briefly, but I took it down, I hope, quick enough. So what are some functions of political parties? What are things that they do in order to help themselves win and achieve their purpose? Some of y'all wiling out in the chat. It's yikes. All right. So I have some things here. Okay, well, what are we talking about there? I'm going to ignore some of the weird stuff that's happening in the chat. Mobilizing, educating voters. Very nice. We're not going to go with lobbying so much because that's more of an interest group function, right? So we'll save that one for just a few moments from now. Raise money, that's a big one. Hold rallies, yeah. Recruit candidates, very nice. That's one of the deeper cuts. Selecting candidates, appealing to voters, very nice. Ashwin, having platforms, Summer Flowers, nominating candidates. Absolutely. Media strategy. That's absolutely right. Shout out to Mr. Gold. I think I've shouted him out like at least in a few of these. So good job making me say that. All right, very nice, very, very nice. Recruit primaries, yeah. So this is pretty much what you guys just said, right? Mobilize voters. So I put here GOTV. That means to get out the vote, which I know is a weird grammatical kind of thing, but that's your acronym, get out the vote. That means actually get people to the polling places, right? So you educate voters. Now remember, parties aren't doing this in a neutral, unbiased way. They are not like hopefully your teacher is, or I am just trying to give you information. The Democratic Party is going to give you biased information to be like, you need to vote Democratic, right? The Republican Party is going to do the same thing. They're going to give you biased information about why they're good and the other party's bad, right? Because their purpose is to win. So you're not getting neutral, nuanced information. You are going to get biased information, but that College Board calls that educating voters. I don't know if that's the word I would use. Maybe I'm a little bit too cynical for that. I don't know. They also are going to make sure that policymakers that, from their party are kind of voting the way they want them to. So we might think of things like party line voting, the party whip, making sure that all the members stick together. So that would be, again, within Congress, that would be a function that they would have. Party platform refers to like the list of political issues. And so you can look it up online. You can Google the 2024 Republican Party platform, the 2024 Democratic Party platform, and it'll be like, here's the major issues: immigration, taxes, Social Security, whatever. And here's what we say should be done. So it's kind of your list of issues and the goals, the policy positions on those. And then you have, like some of you guys already said, we have, I defined a party platform there. Interesting. Recruit and nominate candidates. Okay. Bonnie the Boxer is yelling at me. Lamani, can you answer my question? I don't know. I don't know what your question was. Sorry. Okay. Again, it's people wiling out over here. Okay. So more party functions. If you thought that was all the party functions there are, you were mistaken. There's a lot. And you guys said a lot of these too. So money, right? Media strategy. So then this is straight from College Board. So these aren't my words. That's why these words are so ugly. Use communication technology and voter data to disseminate, control, and clarify political messages and outreach and mobilization. In other words, they use modern technology. So they're going to use social media. They're also going to be a little bit maybe on the sketchy side, right? Where they are using your data and your information so that they can target political messages that are meant for you. So they have gotten really granular with targeting subsets of the population and being like, oh, this is the thing that would help make a person from this demographic group in this area code or this zip code vote the way we want them to vote. And so it has gotten really, really, really specific out there. Okay. Is conservative ideology in favor of government intervention with social issues? Yes. Bump. Can somebody explain mobilization, please? It's getting the people physically to the polls. So you got them on your side. They decided that they like you, and now you need to make sure they actually go and vote for you. And so the Obama campaign, I think, in our like modern lifetime, is the one that's best known for that. They had amazing voter outreach and mobilization efforts. They would rent a ton of buses all over places in the country, and they would just pick people up who might not have transportation, and they would drive them to the polling places to make sure that they vote. So that's what we're talking about with mobilization. Bonnie the Boxer, founder. So the question is, can major parties take ideas from third parties and benefit from them? We haven't gotten to third parties yet. We're almost there. Okay, just hang on a second. We're almost there. Even though people are answering. Okay, so scroll down. All right. LaMoney, pray for us. Ain't nobody praying for me. All right, party influence in Congress, kind of already said this a little bit, not really though. I just did the party line voting part of it, but committee system. So we talk about committees are really important, right? They do all the editing, the markups, they're in charge of oversight. The way you end up on a committee is based on party affiliation. So if your party is the majority, right now Republicans are the majority in the House and the Senate. And so they have a majority of the members on every committee. And they also have the leader of every committee. And so that's going to be a huge advantage for this. Leadership positions, again, your Speaker of the House, your Majority Leader, like they're always going to be from the majority party. Party caucuses, so just know that this is one of the two different ways we use the word caucus. The word means the same thing either time. A party caucus, it's a meeting of party members, but when we're talking about in Congress, we're talking about congressmen. And so you have all the Democrats will caucus or meet together, and they'll kind of make their decisions on certain issues to stay united. The Republicans will do the same thing. There are lots of other caucuses that are kind of smaller groups within the parties. I think you might have heard of the Freedom Caucus has been a really important one in the Republican side for the last couple of years. All right, changing political parties. So the rise of candidate-centered politics. So this is, again, a huge shift more recently. Each of these changes is leading to parties having less power and control. And by the way, let me just take a moment to say thank you to the 346 people who are here right now with us live watching. I appreciate you guys so much. If you haven't already and you want to smash the like button, you can go ahead and smash that like button for me. If you are looking for help, I know, again, we have a little bit of time. We are 17 and a half hours away from the exam right now. So if you wanted to do a couple practice exams and you can't find anywhere else, you can check it out in the description, link to the Ultimate Review Packet, to the Ultimate Exam Slayer. If you're looking for some last minute help, if you want some great study guides to just be staring at over and over, I do have answer keys. So at this point, you probably would just go straight to the answer key, but you have that. So again, if you are interested, check that stuff out. As always, thank you guys for the likes and the support. And again, keep letting me know in the chat if you have questions and things like that. We can try to be a little bit less weird in the chat, but you know, I guess that's part of the fun, right? All right, so all of these changes have led to political parties getting weaker, having less influence. So one of them is candidate-centered politics. This is the idea that more and more people care about the actual candidate than they do about their party affiliation. Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders have been my classic examples since 2016. Donald Trump, let's just do that one real quick. If in 2024, at the beginning of the year, right before the Republican primary and all that, if Donald Trump had come out and said, you know what, I'm not going to run as a Republican this time, I'm going to run as my own Freedom Party or something, or Liberty Party, whatever he wants to call it, the MAGA Party, would that have changed things materially for him? Maybe. But what I know for sure is that his most hardcore followers would have still loved him, right? And they would have voted for him regardless of whether he had a Republican, the word Republican next to his name or not, right? So they were about him, the candidate, not about his party affiliation. Okay. Jeremy asked a good question, actually. Do we need to know the important dates that party de-alignment, realignment for the test, such as years? No, you do not. So 1932 being our last real realignment. There are people who think we're in the midst possibly of a realignment right now. Again, I mentioned some of the demographics changing in the last election, where Trump picked up ground in almost every demographic group there was, actually for 1,000 bonus points. Does anybody know what was the one? It's a very specific, but actually I shouldn't ask it because let me not. Yeah, but there was one demographic group that Democrats did better with in 2024 than they did in 2020. The rest, Trump did better in 2024 than he did in 2020. Yeah. So then you have party realignment. So that's changing. So that's where you have a long lasting. It's why I say people think we might be, because you don't know yet. We need to see what happens in 28, what happens in 32, what happens in 36, etc. But a long lasting shift of party loyalty. So this is, again, the last true party realignment is 1932. And you had a large portion of the country that was Republican became Democratic for about 60 years. So we're talking 6 decades. That's what I mean by a long-lasting shift, right? We also do have regional realignments. I don't have that term up here, but regional realignment is the South had been Democratic forever. It was known as the one-party South. From Andrew Jackson, 1824, until 1960, they had voted solidly Democratic the whole time, right? And then in 1964, civil rights issues come up and they don't vote Democratic. And basically, since then, they haven't really been, they've shifted strongly to the Republican Party now, right? So that's a regional realignment, again, changing from one to the other. Okay. Party de-alignment is what we have been experiencing in this country over the last couple of decades. This is where you have a decline in party identification or party loyalty. So this is people who were Democrats becoming independents, people who were Republican becoming independents, and going with that either no party affiliation or with just independent. All right. Bump, bump, bump. All right. So now we are going to talk about third parties. Okay, so we're going to talk about third parties. I know somebody, I already forgot who asked about the question about third parties, and I think that was Bonnie, right? And I was like, all right, wait, we'll get to third parties in a minute. So now we're here. So Bonnie, I hope you're here. We are going to talk about that. Vicky, your students do rock. I appreciate them. Mr. Hausman, I assume that his students rock also. Bump, bump, bump. Okay. We're just saying hi now. Okay. So that's fine. Okay. So third parties. So let's do it. I thought that maybe Bonnie would pop up in the chat. She just got named. She didn't even ask anything right then. Remember people's names. So we have structural barriers. We have informal barriers, right? So first of all, what is a third party? It's just any party that's not Democrat or Republican. Those are the two major parties. Now, one question, it's always a trick question, is about the Constitution and our two-party system. Political parties are not mentioned in the Constitution. So there's nothing that means that we have to have a two-party system. All right, it is not required. We know, hopefully, we remember from APUSH and maybe even from AP Gov, George Washington, right, his farewell address in which he warned about parties and other things, but he's like, don't do this, it's not good. And then we eventually get to 1824 and we kind of have the birth of like a two-party system. We had it earlier than that too, right? Federalists versus the Democratic Republicans. For those of you who are Hamilton fans, we've had a two-party system on and off since then. And so the question is why? And one of the reasons is the way that we run our elections, right? So just these are the structural barriers. So these are things that are legal, things that are laws about how the elections are run that will naturally lead to there being essentially two dominant parties. And you can just ask yourself, if the two dominant parties dominate the legislative branch in the federal level and in state level, do they really have any incentive to change these laws to make it more inclusive for more parties? And the obvious answer is no, they don't. And so the two parties, they might disagree about a lot of things, but what Democrats and Republicans really agree on, like the party leaders, they agree that they don't want third-party competition, right? And so for better or worse, that's going to be something that's, I think, very, very true. And so these things likely aren't going anywhere. So first thing is, in the chat, anybody want to tell me what is a plurality system? What is a plurality system? So what's that mean? So I'll kind of skip that one and I'll explain some other ones. All right. So what's the plurality system? Winner take all voting districts, I hope means exactly what it sounds like. It means whoever wins the election in that district, they win everything that there is to win. So what I mean by that is they win that seat in Congress. There's no reward for second place. So if you come in, it's like the Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. That's very true in congressional elections. So that's winner take all. Single member districts, very similarly, one person for each district. It doesn't matter how great your third party does. If you come in second, which is amazing for a third party, you don't get a reward, right? So again, discouraging them. I asked what plurality is. I don't see a lot of answers to that. I see a few, okay, people talking about groups and yeah, but green bike lane. So this is going to be, I saw people in the chat right before the live started talking about getting a perfect score on this exam. Green bike lane, I got to say, comes through clutch on these questions, especially the tougher ones. So very nice job. It's where whoever has the most votes wins, which is different than a majority. So again, I can really quickly ask that for the chat. What's a majority system? So what's the difference between plurality, the most votes wins, and a majority? Reese with the Ricky Bobby quote. Of course. Winner takes all, majority means one over. So there you go. So one more than half. So 50% plus one is how I always define a majority. So very nice to HZLS. All right, very nice. Rock with Surratt says greater than 50%. That is exactly right. Okay, so The ballot requirements, there are some states that their laws are kind of crazy. Like literally to get on the ballot, if you're a Democrat or Republican, you need like 30 signatures, like literally like 30. And then if you want to get on the ballot as a third party, you need tens of thousands of signatures. So they just make it way tougher for the third parties than they do for the major parties. And so that obviously is a huge barrier. So they can't even get on all the ballots in every state, which is going to make their life really difficult. And the Electoral College, we'll talk more about that one in a few moments. Now, we also have informal barriers. These are the ones that I think that Bonnie had mentioned one of these back in her post earlier on. I don't know if Bonnie's still around. It's hard to say. But this is where the major parties, Democrats, Republicans, are going to steal the best ideas. And I say best, I shouldn't say best. I should say the most popular ideas, because it could be a terrible idea just because people like it. Doesn't mean it's actually good, right? But they can steal the most popular ideas from the minor party or the third parties and basically kind of steal that issue from the third party. So a pretty classic example of this is going to be Democrats taking environmental issues from like a Green Party, for example. So the Green Party wants to be very liberal. So it's a more liberal party than Democrats, right? And they're going to be very progressive on environmental issues. Democrats see this and they see a lot of their members are like, why don't you do what the Green Party is doing? And some of their members might even start going towards the Green Party. And so to win those people back, when that issue becomes sufficiently popular, they're going to be like, well, you know what we can do? Why don't we take over the mantle as being the environmental party? Now, this is a barrier for the Green Party, right? Because if you think about it, you are a person who cares about the environment a lot. That is your big issue. And you can vote for the Green Party, who you think is the best for the environmental issues. But you know in your heart, they're not going to win. Now you have a choice. You can vote for the one you really, really love, not going to win. But if you do that, you might be worried. And this is where you feel like some of these other ones about wasting your vote, right? It's like, well, but if I vote, first of all, then my guy's not even going to win. And even worse, at least the Democrats are kind of environmental. I don't think the Republican candidate is at all. And then so you might fear that instead, maybe I should vote for the Democrat who's kind of about the environment. And that's at least better than the other one who I don't think is about the environment at all. And so this is where people kind of talk themselves into voting for candidates they don't like as much, for parties they don't like as much. But you can see where the two parties are wildly unpopular, right? People say they hate the two-party system. They don't like either of their options, right? Those of you who have followed politics for the entire time you guys have been able to follow politics, we've had 3 elections with 6 of the most unpopular candidates ever. And so I'm including Trump in all 3 of those, right? So Trump, and then Clinton, Biden, and Harris. All of them with pretty spectacularly low popularity ratings, and yet those were always the choices, right? And it comes down to people say they don't like either candidate, and what do? They vote for one of the 2 major candidates. Why? Because they feel like they're wasting their vote. They feel like they might be helping the one they really dislike if they do vote for their actual preferred candidate. And so that's obviously going to hurt them. Now, a good question is, why is this an informal barrier? Well, is there any law here? Is there a law that says that the news media won't give as much attention to the third parties? No. Is there any law that says you have to feel like you're wasting your vote, or you have to feel like you'd rather vote for the lesser of 2 evils? No. Is there any law that says you can't give as much money to the minor party, third party as you can to the major parties? No. So again, all these things are changeable by people with relative ease, right? The difference is that people kind of say one thing and then their actions, their behavior shows maybe a slightly different perspective than what they might be saying. All right, so just kind of glancing over here. Funny question there. I won't read that one out loud just in case. Never. Come on. That's a good guy. What are you talking about? You can sub to both, I guess. As a share of our relative audiences, you'd be a bigger share of mine than of his. Dude is closing in on 1 million subs. It's wild. I'm just in here trying to get to 40 before this AP exam ends. I don't know if I'm going to get there. I'm getting close, but oof. Mr. McLagan, is that a real name? If it is, it's kind of amazing. I won't lie. All right. Again, just glance at the chat for one more minute. Campaign finance. Yes, we will absolutely do campaign finance probably in about 10 minutes or so. So very, very shortly, I swear. Waffle House, that's amazing. All right, yeah, campaign finance is coming up very, very soon. Mrs. Hammers, Mr. McLaughlin. Okay. A production of Hamilton. I gotta be Burr. I want to be Thomas Jefferson. Come on. Jefferson's obviously the best character in that. And I get to be America's favorite fighting Frenchman, Lafayette. All right. Next, interest groups. So we're going to go through interest groups kind of quickly. We're going to go a little bit faster. At this point, we've done a lot of the major things. Okay. They attempt to influence policy. They have a specific purpose. Typically, sometimes that's less true. So there are more broad-based interest groups. The one I'm describing here is really could also be called a single interest group. So they have like one topic that they're, what they're all about. And that's what they focus on. All right. Professor Jones. Okay. Christine is taking this horse by the reins. Good stuff. All right. Interest group functions are very similar to party functions, right? Educating voters. Again, it's going to be not neutral. It's going to be biased information because they are going to be more ideological. So interest groups are usually going to be nonpartisan. All nonpartisan means is that they are not affiliated with a party. That does not mean they're neutral, okay? So please just know that for life. I don't think that's going to be on the AP exam, but people sometimes, I think, make the mistake of a group is like, oh, we're a nonpartisan group. Yeah, that just means that they are not part of the Republican or the Democratic Party, but they can be 100% biased in favor of one of those parties against the other one. So don't get too, okay. If you're too worried, people in the chat making me laugh, scared, crazy. All right, so drafting legislation. So again, we mentioned this one a couple days ago in one of the reviews. Only a member of Congress can introduce legislation, but they can have lobbyists that are, to quote Aaron Burr, in the room where it happens, and they can help them to edit and to revise bills. They can even give them essentially, here's the template for the bill we want you to pass, right? And that doesn't introduce it, doesn't make it a law. It's still up to Congress, but they can be there giving their suggestions on bills, saying, here, word it this way and we'll support it. If you word it that way, we won't support it. They can mobilize their membership to say, all right, hey, vote this person out. They are against your rights. They're against our group, whatever interest it is that we're representing. We need to be for this party or against that one. They also can be part of iron triangles. We'll talk about that one. I have another slide where that will come in just a moment. More functions, testifying at committee hearings. So remember when they're in like the committees are in the editing markup stage, another thing they do is they hold hearings to say, all right, well, let's get some information. Let's talk to experts. A lot of times the experts that they're talking to, I shouldn't have done that. They are experts. They know what they're talking about. They are well versed at their specific policy area. And they come in and they testify in front of Congress and say, here's why we need the bill to be this way. Here's the needs. Here are the studies we've done about this issue, because they might be like more of a think tank type of a group. And here's what you need to do, right? And then there's obviously, lobbying is on the next one. So I was like, wait, did I skip lobbying? It's next, because that's obviously going to be the biggest one. They also create PACs. So Kimber just asked, can I explain PACs? PACs, pretty please. That's tough to say. PACs, pretty please. Yes, I can. I will do that more in a few minutes. So let me get to campaign finance. I'll get there. Give me 10 minutes, all right? And we'll go into PACs in more details and super PACs. They endorse candidates. So they say, all right, this candidate is an A-rated candidate from our group because they always vote the right way on whatever issue it is. They also help get out the vote, advertise for candidates, organize protests, demonstrations, all that kind of thing. The biggest one is going to be lobbying. So lobbying is where they provide information to members of Congress. They are not giving them money. That's bribery. That's illegal. Even if we think that that might happen, that is not going to be on the AP Gov exam, all right? So in AP Gov world, everything is nice and it's not corrupt, okay? So they are going to provide information to congressmen. Now you're going to have natural alliances between certain interest groups with either the Democratic or the Republican Party, right? So if you are a NRA lobbyist, National Rifle Association lobbyist, most of your target audience is going to be Republicans with maybe a few Democrats in red states. And so those are going to be the people that you focus on. You're not trying to convince a very liberal progressive representative that they should suddenly be for gun rights. Like, that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to, focus on the people who are actually aligned with them somewhat ideologically and put pressure on them, right? The liberal groups, they will focus on the liberal senators and representatives, not on the conservatives ones. So hopefully that makes sense. So they'll have certain ones to worry with. K Street is lobbying. You don't need to know that. That's just literally the street where there's office buildings and all of that. Man, I can't believe it took, maybe I just haven't noticed in the chat. I thought for sure I was going to see the 100 men versus one gorilla thing in the chat this week, and I haven't really seen it. And now I see a version of it instead. Don't forget to say this has been a Money production on your FRQ. If you haven't already, make sure to smash that like button. Again, thank you to the 355 people who are here right now. I appreciate it so much, your trust, your confidence in me. I will do everything I can to help get you ready. So stay with me. You might sleep a little bit less tonight than normal, but hopefully you get some good sleep in. Maybe you don't go to class at 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Maybe you sleep in and you go to school a little bit closer to the AP exam. But we'll see. To what extent do we need to know specific jargon like amicus curiae, stare decisis? Those are the two Latin terms you definitely do need to know. So yes, you should know those. Revolving door we'll get to. It's on my next slide. Okay. Speaking of amicus curiae brief, so members of interest groups don't just lobby the executive branch and the legislative branch, although that's what we think of with actual like lobbying, face-to-face conversations, convincing them vote this way on a bill. They also try to lobby the courts, but this lobbying is very different. They do not meet face-to-face with judges. They do not take judges out for lunch. That would be violations of ethics and could lead to impeachment and all sorts of things. So that's not what occurs. Instead, they file lawsuits. That's what the word litigation means. They're going to use the court system. They'll file a lawsuit on behalf of people and say, all right, we think that this group or this person's rights are being violated, and we want the court to make them whole. We want the court to strike down this law that we think is bad policy or is unconstitutional. And then with amicus curiae briefs, some of you might already remember from Unit 2, that means friend of the court. So these are people who are not directly involved in the case, but they want to influence the way the court rules, and so they will file an amicus curiae brief. All right, grassroots lobbying is when they go directly to the people. So instead of going to policymakers like with all the others, this is them coming to the people and saying, all right, well, if we can get a lot of the public on our side, then maybe that can influence the policy. And so they try to convince people this is going to work best on relatively simple issues, ones that aren't overly complicated or complex or nuanced. All right. Okay. Some people might need to be removed from the chat. Potential problems of interest groups. So we talked about this again also yesterday. I think when we did multiple choice maybe or something, but we have talked about this a little bit about elite democracy. The idea is that there would be pluralist democracy, right? Different groups competing for power. So you have pro-choice groups, you have pro-life groups, all that kind of thing. But then there's a question of, are we sure that it's not elite democracy? Because who's most likely to be represented by an interest group? People with more money. A lot of them are going to be representing businesses and certain industries, sectors of the economy. So you have where some of these groups have lots of economic resources. They're very, very well funded. Others have lots of members. And so the bigger, stronger groups with more membership or with more money, they're going to have more influence than smaller groups. There is also a free rider problem. This is where people basically aren't incentivized to join an interest group, because if the group is successful, then they will get the benefit whether or not they're a member. And so this is a problem for groups because they need people to join so they get their money so they can do stuff. But sometimes it's tough to convince people they should actually join, as opposed to just being a free rider and sitting back and enjoying the benefit without giving the money. Revolving door, which somebody was yelling at me, wanted me to talk about the revolving door. So this is talking about when members of Congress leave Congress, like their term is up, they retire, they resign, whatever. a lot of them go into being a lobbyist. So they get hired by an interest group and they become a lobbyist. And so this is seen as a potential negative because, well, a representative and a senator, they should be representing their constituents, the people back home in their district or in their state. And then the question becomes like, all right, are we sure that they're really representing the constituents, or are they trying to get a job with an interest group? And those jobs are usually very well paying. A lot of times those are going to be potentially 7-figure jobs. And so they have a lot of money to make by being a lobbyist. And so, yeah, that could create some conflicts. It's not illegal, but what they've done is there have been some reforms to narrow this. Now, some of these reforms have actually been undone in the last few months. But for the AP Gov exam, you can't become a lobbyist for 2 years after your term in Congress ends. So you leave Congress, you have to wait 2 years. And that doesn't stop people from becoming lobbyists, but that cooling off period, so to speak, it does slow it down. It means they got to wait to get paid. We have to know their names. They have to be publicly registered so the whole world knows, oh, they became a lobbyist. They're getting paid by by pharma or something like that. So that's the way to try, at least at this moment. That's the effort to undo this. All right, we talked about this one last night as well. Social movements, broad-based efforts to achieve major policy change. We're thinking, again, something that's more grassroots, more that's from the people. There is something called an AstroTurf movement. I don't think that'll be on the AP exam. Whoa, shout out Mr. Sheets. Is that, so Giovanni, is that Mr. Sheets from West Barrett High School? Just wondering, because the guy next door to me happens to be a Mr. Sheets, so could be. All right, well, look at that. So are you still in Sheets? And Mr. Sanchez, there we go. All right, so you must be in 4th period. So there is another teacher there. Or it could just be a username, and I don't know who it is. So, all right, so social movements, again, we're trying to have major change. They can be successful. They can get momentum building, and they can be definitely way 1st period. Interesting. Whoa. Oh, I thought we have the owner of Google is here, guys. It's, things have gotten serious now. All right, moving on to elections. Okay. We have primary elections. We have general elections. Primaries are, the purpose is to choose a candidate from the party who will run in the general election. If you win the general election, you win office. If you win the primary, you get to be your party's candidate for the general election. As we close in on 1 hour here. So we're going to try to finish up in the next 10 to 12 minutes or so. We can have a little break, and then we'll be back at 8 o'clock. So open primaries. Some states have open primaries because remember, states are in charge of elections. So some do an open primary, which is the idea that you show up on election day and you get to choose whether you're going to vote in the Democratic or the Republican Party's primary. So some states have that. Other states have closed primaries where you have to be registered to that specific party in order to participate. So if you are an independent voter, if you are a no party affiliation voter, and your state is a closed primary state, you do not get to vote in the primary. So you'd have to change your registration in the weeks or months before that so that you could actually get that and participate in that. All right. How does a candidate, we're talking about presidential elections. How does a candidate become their party's nominee? They do that by winning the majority of delegates at the national convention. So again, this is more complicated. It's not, you don't get hung up on the details, because if you get bogged down in the details of elections, this can be the most stressful section in the whole class, because every state runs their elections a little bit differently. So don't worry about it, okay? And the parties run their primaries differently. So again, don't worry about it too much. And they change their rules every 4 years. The big picture, though, this statement is going to be true. So you could see this as a question, I suppose. There is a thing called the National Convention. The Democrats have one. The Republicans have one. So do the Libertarians and the Green Party and all the third parties. They all have them too. But it's basically a 4-day-long party where they come together and they give a bunch of speeches and say how great they are and how awful the other party is, how awful the other candidate is. It's where they officially choose their candidate for the presidency, like who's going to be their presidential candidate, right? And so you have all the people, like when you win a primary, your reward is delegates. It's kind of like the Electoral College, but different. But yeah, They get sent to the national convention that takes place, in like July or August typically of the election year. And it's their job to vote for the candidate they're assigned to vote for. And whoever gets a majority of those voters at the national convention, they win the nomination. All right, you might have questions about that still. That's okay. It's not worth more of your time. All right, primaries. The process is now more democratic. Notice that's a lowercase d. Democratic meaning like more democracy, right? People having more power. So we can say that the Republican Party primary process is more democratic than it used to be. All right, so please, when you see the word Republican with a little r or Democratic with a little d, it is not talking about the party. It is talking about the idea of either being representative or people having power. All right, so this is going to make it more democratic and again, weaken the influence of the party itself. The Electoral College, everybody's favorite thing. Okay, so the Electoral College, that's who officially elects the president. So they are formed every 4 years. They meet in state capitals to do their work. And so they meet together in Tallahassee or whatever state you happen to be in. They meet in the state capital and they say, all right, here's, how we're voting. How do they know how to vote? It depends how the people in their state voted. All right, so most states are winner take all. And actually, let me just go ahead. The rest of the stuff on this slide, you can see the words, not a huge deal. So we're going to focus on the details of it, right? 538 electoral votes. 538 electoral votes total. You need a simple majority or half plus one, which is going to come out to 270 to win. So 270 electoral votes and you win the presidency. The popular vote does not matter. Again, we know that. You guys were alive in 2016, so most of you should remember that. And if you didn't, well, you took AP Gov this year, so I'm sure that you know Hillary Clinton got more votes total in the United States than Donald Trump did in 2016. So why wasn't she president? Because she did not win the Electoral College, right? Like that is how you win the presidency, is by winning the Electoral College. Do we need to know the total amount of electoral votes? Probably not. They would probably provide that information for you. I doubt you would need to know, like be tested, and the answer would be 538. I can't really imagine that. But yeah. All right. 48 of the states are winner take all. So that means if you win that state, so like let's do Florida. Florida has 30 electoral votes. If Trump were to defeat Harris by 1 vote in the state of Florida, his reward for winning by 1 vote would be he would get 30 electoral votes. She would get 0. 30 to 0, winner take all. So whoever wins, the margin of victory in your state does not matter. So again, the real life example of that was back in 2000. George Bush beat Al Gore in Florida by 537 votes. That's out of millions of votes that were cast. He won by 537. It was less than a tenth of a percentage point, but he got all 25 of the state's electoral votes. And whoever won the state of Florida was going to win the presidency. So it can be a really, really big deal. All right. Anything else here? Oh, swing states. So yeah, we know that, right? Like that's easy too. Swing states, battleground states, states that they focus on ones that have ideally more electoral votes and are competitive. The and is really important there. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting. California has the most electoral votes. So you guys tell me in the chat, why don't candidates focus on California? It had 54 electoral votes in 2024. It had 55 before that. Why don't they focus on California? Why don't they focus that much on Texas? Why don't they focus on New York? They didn't even really focus on Florida this last time. Those are your 4 biggest states, electoral vote-wise. And like Isabella says, it's solidly Democratic. Vodka Drunkinsky, it's not competitive. The boss says they vote Democrat. Kimber says it's because it's a blue state. I love that was like so many different ways to say the exact same thing. You guys are absolutely right. Emma says it's not a swing state because it's going to be Democrat, says the owner of Google. You heard it from the owner of Google. So yeah, there's no point. There's no point for the losing party to waste time and money and resources there. There's also no point for the winning party, right? Like Democrats, you're gonna win California no matter what. Why waste money there, right? Republicans, you're not gonna win California. Why waste money there? Now, again, we have seen some things shifting where, this stuff changes over time. California was a little bit more competitive, still not competitive at all. Texas was a little bit more competitive, but still not overly competitive. So these things can change. And so as some of these states get closer, we'll see them, obviously focus a little bit more on them. All right. Pink is watching this during her lunch break or his lunch break. Thank you for supporting. Hopefully you're able to enjoy your lunch. All right, the Electoral College says that if nobody wins 270 electoral votes, it is the House of Representatives that's going to decide that election. This has happened a couple times in U.S. history, not very often. 1824 is going to be a really famous example of it. 1800, another famous example. So it's happened a few times. Each state gets one vote. So the House, all your representatives come together and they cast one vote together. And they might vote again and again and again. So this is the Burr-Jefferson one in 1800. All right. Arguments in favor of the Electoral College and against the Electoral College. She's asked, by the way, how are electors chosen? Honestly, don't worry about it. It is different in every state. The very simple but kind of a live version for AP Gov is just let's say that the candidate picks. So it's essentially like Trump gets to choose the electors if he wins the state. Harris gets to choose the electors if she wins the state. That is not really true, but that it works as an oversimplification for just getting the idea. You don't need to know. You don't need to know. All right. Okay. Bump. Can we go over often forgotten details in the Electoral College and also how you could win the popular vote? Not. Well, more people, you win a few states by a lot and then you lose a few states by a little. And that's how you win the popular vote and you lose the electoral vote. That's what happened to Hillary, right? She won California by several million votes. Those are all excess votes. They don't matter, right? And then she lost by a few thousand votes or 10,000 votes in a few states. So she just barely lost states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. And that's all it takes. So a few close losses with a few other huge victories, and then you win the popular and you lose the electoral. All right, so arguments in favor of the Electoral College, guards against mob rule. This one isn't a great argument anymore. This one is kind of going back to the beginning, right? Which is the people weren't voting for the president. Today, people vote for the president. Now, you don't directly elect the president. Like I said, it's kind of the simple way to think of it is vote in your state, and whoever wins your state, all the electors in your state are going to vote for that candidate. Again, I know I'm being a little bit of an oversimplification. It's okay. This is the day before the exam. This is not the time for all the nuance. I'm aware that that's not always true. But yeah, these days, because the Electoral College just does whatever their voters in their state does, that argument, I think, is not particularly strong anymore. States retain their importance in choosing the president. So again, people who are more about the state and want things like the state or the candidates to focus on the state of Florida or the state of Michigan or the state of Pennsylvania, and make promises that benefit the state. They're going to be, in favor of this. Ensures candidates have to appeal to all the voters and can't focus only on densely populated areas. So again, how true this is, especially that first part, appeal to all voters, because they're going to ignore 42 states. They basically focused on 6 to 8 states in 2024 and pretty much nobody else. And so does that mean that they're really appealing to all voters? I don't know, but it does mean what this really would be better off saying is something about geographic balance. So the idea is if the state of Pennsylvania is in question, an urban voter is equal to a rural voter. If we were doing popular vote, you might end up just focusing on all the urban voters because there's more of them in total in the country. And so the way to win would be all right, let's do the urban and the suburban voters, forget about the rural voters. And so when you have to consider a state, and some states have very large rural populations, then the candidates have to also worry about rural voters. And so that's the kind of geographic balance that supporters are going to talk about. All right, anti-electoral college. People have enough information. We don't need to worry about uninformed voters anymore. It gives too much power to voters in swing states. So why are we letting people in 6 to 8 states decide the presidency? And some people say that it is anti-democratic, again, lowercase d, because it's ignoring the popular vote. So it is possible, and it does happen, where a candidate sometimes wins the presidency without winning a majority of the votes. All right, we're going to go through some of this stuff really, really quickly. I want to get you guys out of here in the next 10 minutes. So thank you once again. We're up to 361 people here tonight. So thank you guys. If you haven't and you want to smash that like button, you can always do that. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Make sure you subscribe. Help me get to 40,000 today. So when you guys come back tomorrow, right after the AP exam, and you're commenting on, videos, and you're telling me how easy the AP exam was, that's always nice. And hopefully you'll see it says 40K. It's small, but we're growing. All right. Sometimes a movement takes some time to really get rolling. Sarah asks a great question. What's the point of having a popular vote if it all depends on the Electoral College? Are they both connected? Honestly, there's no such thing as the popular vote. There is nothing official about the popular vote. Rather, what happens is that news organizations take the vote from every state and they just add them all up. And that's how you get the popular vote. So there's nothing official about the popular vote, because remember, the way that you win the electoral votes in Florida is you win Florida. So we have a total for Florida. It says this many for Trump, this many for Harris. And then Georgia has the same thing, and South Carolina has the same thing. And so all you have to do is add up all of those votes. So it's not as if anybody is doing the popular vote. I hope that makes sense. You can let me know in the chat. All right, so then congressional incumbency advantages. This is just the idea that members of Congress are very likely to win re-election. So again, even though Congress is wildly unpopular, and it's been that way for decades, again, regardless of whether it's Democratic, Republican, or not at all, like it's mixed, people vote for their same congressman over and over again. So 90% of the time, members of Congress win re-election. You have a few reasons for that. Casework, meaning like constituent service, the things they do to help the people in their districts. I wouldn't worry about franking privilege anymore. That's like the ability to send mail for free, so they don't have to pay for postage. That's more of an old school one. You can tell by how like the lack of technology in that. PAC contributions. Again, we will talk about PACs momentarily. I promise. Name recognition, so you're just more likely to have heard of them. They get more media attention, all of those things. In addition to presidential elections, we also have midterm elections. Those are the off years. So you have 2020 and 2024 were presidential election years. Midterms are in 2022, and we'll have those again in 2026. They have lower turnout than presidential elections. They don't get as much media attention. There's not as much money spent on them. But yeah, people vote. The people who do vote, though, are typically the ones who really care about politics. So there are people who all they do is they vote once every 4 years, right? They're like, oh, that's my civic duty as the president. They hear about it all the time. Do your duty, vote. And so they show up to the presidential election. But some of those people don't really care about politics that much, right? On the other hand, people for midterm elections, the people for primaries, they're the ones who really care, the ones who are strongly Democratic or strongly Republican. And since at midterm elections, that's where members of the House are being elected, 1/3 of the Senate is up during midterm elections. You end up where, again, congressmen are often going to be more partisan and more ideological a lot of times, because that's who's voting in those elections. All right. Presidential incumbency advantage with a question mark. It does exist. I think it's a little bit questionable to what extent. The data on this is nowhere near 90%. So this is not as strong as Congress. So I don't love that we teach this, but it is in AP Gov. So, I'm going to teach you what's on AP Gov. So what would be some advantages for the president when he runs as an incumbent? Everybody knows who the president is. They have the bully pulpit, so they can talk and everybody listens. They pay attention to what the president does, what they say. They have campaign experience. Obviously, they already won the presidency before. So they already have their network of their contributors, of their staff. They have people. And since they've done it before, like they kind of know the strategy, how they won last time, they can build on that. And sometimes there's this fear. So like Trump is a good example of this. In 2016, there was an argument that he wasn't presidential. Everybody's like, can you imagine Trump being president? Now, it doesn't mean that people in 2020 were like, oh, he's the most presidential person ever. I don't think many people thought that in 2020 or in 2024. But you don't really make that same argument because everybody can picture him as president because he was president for 4 years already. So again, that can be an advantage. All right. And then the last thing I want to do in this section, so it's not the last thing overall, but just looking, I actually don't have banners. I don't have banners about PACs and political, all right, so let's just do PACs and super PACs and campaign finance. Let's do that briefly. So I don't have banners for this one, so we'll just have to kind of, hopefully the words that I say will be enough. All right, campaign finance, money in politics. One of the big ideas is that it takes a lot of money spent on politics these days, like lots and lots, like billions with a B of dollars spent on presidential elections. All right, so there's a main debate about this, which is free speech versus kind of like campaign integrity or electoral election integrity, if you want to say. So there are people who say everybody should be able to spend as much money as they want because, hey, it's your money and this is how you want to express yourself. So this is just a free speech issue. So if I want to spend my whole life savings making commercials and advertisements for a candidate or against a candidate, then let me do that. It's my money and it's my free speech, right? Other people say, yeah, but people with a lot of money, millionaires, billionaires, obviously Elon Musk is going to be probably the person that comes to your mind when we talk about this. They have so much more money than, millions of people combined that they will be able to influence elections to such a large degree that it's just not fair. And so people who want limits on contributions, they're usually worried about the influence that the super rich could have on politics. So with that in mind, you have a few things that we can discuss briefly. One is a law from the year 2002. It's called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. The acronym for that is BCRA, B-C-R-A. The AP exam loves asking about BCRA. It banned soft money contributions, which I guess means I have to define soft money. So we have two types of money, hard money and soft money. Hard money refers to money given directly to the candidate. There is a limit on that. It's about $3,000. And so you can only give up to that certain amount. And if you do, everybody knows your name. It has to be public record. It's closely regulated and restricted. Okay, then soft money. You want a loophole. I have a lot of money I really want to give. I can only give $3,000 to the candidate. So instead, I'm going to give an unlimited amount of money to the party. And now the party will disperse that money to the various candidates. And through that loophole, soft money, I'm able to give a lot of money. BCRA banned soft money, but that ban has been struck down. So soft money is back. So what I just described is allowed. It was not allowed for 8 years, but it's back. And it's been back since 2010. So soft money is allowed. There is a third option, though. And this one might be my preferred one. All right. So I'm really rich and I want to give way more than $3,000. Right. But I don't really want to give it to the party because the party's going to give it to lots of people in the party, ones that I don't even like. And really, I don't even like the party that much. I like that candidate. So what do? So this is where I would create a PAC or I might donate to a PAC. So maybe there's one that already exists. Maybe I create it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Political Action Committee. So this is where a bunch of different people can pool their money together to be spent independently of the candidate. So the PAC is going to engage in what's known as independent expenditures. So they are not aligned officially with the candidate, but they just so happen to give very good commercials to one candidate and to run really negative advertisements about the other candidate. So that's what's happening here. So my Political Action Committee supports the candidate's campaign, I can give as much money as I want. So I can raise an unlimited amount of money and the PAC can spend an unlimited amount of money. So again, if you have questions about PACs, let me know in the chat. I'm happy to try to get into more detail on that. Then Citizens United. So one of your required cases. Again, remember, we got to know the facts, the holding, and the reasoning. The facts of that case is that there was a group called Citizens United. They were a conservative nonprofit group. And long story short, because the facts, I could go on to a lot of detail on that. But essentially, they make this movie. It's called Hillary the Movie. And this movie is basically just anti-Hillary Clinton propaganda. Back in 2008, they hated her. They said she's going to destroy the world. And what they did was they aired commercials for their movie in the days right before the 2008 primaries. They tried to. But that violated BCRA. So that law, again, Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, said that corporations and unions could not run ads, political ads, 30 to 60 days before an election. And that's what they were trying to do. So they sue, and the Supreme Court is going to rule in their favor. And they're going to strike down the ban on the timing of ads. But they're also going to do a lot more than that. They're going to say, okay, but corporations and unions also have free speech. Now, that part's not new. The Supreme Court has long held that corporations have protections from the Bill of Rights. They have Fourth Amendment protections, they have First Amendment protections, et cetera. Because all a corporation is a group of people. All a union is a group of people, right? So they have constitutional protections. But what they now say is, since corporations are people, and since people have free speech, corporations have free speech, spending money on elections is a form of free speech. And therefore, corporations and unions cannot be limited when it comes to their independent political spending. All right. So corporations, I'm going to say that again. Corporations and unions can raise and spend an unlimited amount of money on politics, but it has to be independent of the campaign. So another thing that BICRA did was that it banned corporations and unions from giving money directly to a candidate. That ban is still in effect today in 2024. A corporation and a union or a union cannot give any money directly to a candidate. All right. Now, because of that, corporations and unions, therefore, cannot give money to regular political action committees, regular PACs. Why not? Because the vast majority of the money a PAC spends is independent of a candidate. However, PACs are allowed to give a small amount of money directly to the candidate. And again, for there's the answer. I was going to say for 5,000 points, but the answer is $5,000. How much money can a PAC give directly to a candidate? $5,000. No, you don't need to know that. It's just a relatively small amount of money. Because corporations and unions can't give any money directly to a candidate, that means they cannot give any money to a PAC. So, Citizens United, the ruling, First Amendment, free speech, corporations, free speech, they can give unlimited amounts of money. This is going to lead to the formation of super PACs. It's just a different type of PAC. And super PAC is not the official name. The official name is an independent expenditure only committee. Independent expenditure only committee. It's a committee that can only engage in independent expenditures. So super PAC can raise as much money from corporations and unions as they want. They can spend as much as they want, as long as every dime is independent of the campaign. All right. I hope that makes sense. I know that that's complicated. It is probably the most complicated thing in AP Gov is campaign finance and electoral college. So if you need more and you want details, then watch video 5.11 or the Citizens United video. And I'm not just trying to plug the videos because obviously I want you watching my videos, but those would be videos that might actually be worth getting into the details on. So again, if you do that, if you're going for a 5, if you're still struggling trying to get a 3, then just be on the basic review videos. But if you want to know as much as you can about campaign finance, 5.11 and Citizens United. I'm going to glance at the chat. I just want to see, I'm looking for campaign finance questions. If, anybody has things like that. Shout. Well, but Conrad's not in my first period. I remember that. He's in 5th period, not first period. Bump. Mustafa. Okay. Calm down. Thanks for hearting my videos. Yes, please cool it indeed. Mr. Grant, you're the GOAT. It's what I'm told. So I have to shout you out. Mr. Truong, same thing. I hear you're one of the GOATs. I've shouted you out a few times. So here you go again, because Kaysen is really desperate for it. Oh no, Pink's lunch break's ending. Bye. Have a good shift. Where do you work? Don't tell that on the internet. Actually, these people are great, and it wouldn't be weird at all. Random player asks, shout out to Mrs. Lloyd first. Kaylin says, is non-connected PAC different donation limit than connected PAC? So don't worry about that. That's way into the weeds. You don't need to know that versus 50C3 groups. There are a lot of actual different, it's just different boxes they check. For AP Gov, we treat all of them the same, honestly. A connected PAC is just linked to a candidate, whereas a non-connected PAC has to be independent of the candidate. So don't worry about that, because actually, yeah. Sam, did VICRA ban hard money? No, it did not. So you still are allowed to give money directly to a candidate, just up to like about $3,000. Random player said, what did Bipartisan Act do compared to Citizens United? They did kind of opposite things, right? So Citizens United struck down two parts of VICRA. It struck down the ban on the timing of political ads, and it struck down the ban on soft money. Two parts of VICRA that survived was the ban on corporations giving directly to candidates. That's still there. It survived from VICRA. And also the stand by your ad provisions. That's where at the end of a commercial, you'll hear, I'm Kamala Harris and I approve this message, or I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message. That's from VICRA. And so obviously we just lived through this. And so we know that that still is a requirement. No, you do not need to know McCutcheon versus FEC. That was actually on the AP exam a couple of years ago as the non-required case, but no, you do not need to know that. I already shouted out Ben Truong. So there you go. Last time. What's the ratio of the amount of votes from people to get one electoral vote? So really, Sarah, the way to think of that is it's based on House representation plus your Senate representation. So like why do states have the number of electoral votes they have? Take their number of representatives and add it to their number of senators. So the House is the population part, but everybody has 2 senators. So there's not a constant ratio. So this is why we say that small states are overrepresented, because the state of Wyoming, which their population is about 500,000 or 600,000, they get 3 electoral votes. So that's an electoral vote for every 200,000 people. State of Florida has 22 million people and it has 30 electoral votes. So that's 1 electoral vote per every about 800,000 or 900,000 people. So you have a very different ratio. So there's actually not a single answer to that question. Shout out to Mr. Boyd. Wait, so do PACs only use hard money and it's limited? No, most of PAC spending is called independent expenditures. All right. They are allowed to give hard money contribution of $5,000, but $5,000 is nothing. To a PAC, $5,000 is a rounding error, okay? Because the big ones are raising millions of dollars. So PACs and super PACs are overwhelmingly doing independent expenditures. Soft money versus hard money. So yeah, Roberta, I think we're good on that. I hope soft money is to the party and it's unlimited. Hard money is to the candidate and it's limited. Shout out again to Mr. Vicari at Richard Montgomery High School. The 3 M's, money, media, and momentum for incumbency advantage. Hey, that works. It's a nice little thing to remember. It's not how I've taught it, but that makes sense. I like it. Shout out Mrs. Post. Can you explain why Citizens United were found in violating BICRA in the first place? Because their ads were too close to the election. Basically, what the FEC, Federal Election Commission, said was that they weren't really advertising a movie. They were making campaign commercials. And again, if you want the whole story, watch my video on Citizens United. I give you the whole story. It's too much detail here, in all honesty, like more than you need. But if you're curious, I actually do think it's a really interesting story. Shout out Mrs. Hendy, Mr. Vanderporten. I did that. What's Miguel trolling me for? Come on, what did I do to deserve that? Would you rather watch a tree grow? Okay. Wow, I'm glad I stopped before. Said anything beyond that. We should ban work for Google. Asia. Okay. Types of scrutiny. We did that yesterday. So again, strict is going to be the toughest for the law to survive. Intermediate in between, and then rational basis can be pretty easy. Ellie asks, there we go, back on topic. What's Buckley versus Vallejo? It's a case from 1976 that established that spending money is a form of free speech. What's up, Alina? And okay. All right, I'm way behind in the chat. Whew, way behind. Good Lord. People are just saying stuff. All right, so I'm going to leave the chat behind. Okay. I don't know how to say your name, though. I'm sorry. Arna? Is it just Arna? Arna? I guess I usually take pride in being good at pronouncing names. I'm sorry. Anya, can you explain fiscal monetary policy, bro? Please, I need help. I did yesterday, though. Fiscal is tax and spending. Monetary is interest rates. Tax and spending, fiscal is done by Congress and the president. Monetary is done by the Federal Reserve. All right, news media, last thing. Oh, man, it's 7:30, bro. We got to go. We have on minute number 90 right now. Shout out to Mr. Birch. Okay. Oh, good. I got it right. So that's good. Okay. News media, people used to get their news from old-fashioned media sources, right? Newspapers, radio, today, internet, social media, even more, it's often ideologically driven. So you end up people in like their own thought bubbles, and they just get their news from conservative sources. They don't even hear anything else, or they just get it from liberal sources or libertarian or socialist or fascist or whatever other sources. And so you end up with, again, this could be contributing to our polarization. Political knowledge is affected by the fact that we have access to more news and information than ever before. Again, social media, anybody can view the news now if they get a following on TikTok or on YouTube or something like that. But that also means that maybe things like accuracy and, neutrality are kind of out the window because that's not really what sells. I was doing current events from January to April, and that gets a little challenging because I'm sitting here being super neutral, and that's not what people want. They want people to be, very biased in one way or the other. Yes, there was an AP Gov morning routine YouTube short. It wasn't, yeah. I kept the shirt on for that, but unlike some people, maybe the original. All right, 3 roles of the news media. Gatekeeper is deciding what's newsworthy. So are they going to report about it or not? This is going to influence policy agenda through agenda setting. So essentially, do they report on it or not? If they do, it becomes more important. So agenda setting is kind of three-step process. The news media reports on something. It then becomes important to members of the public, and then they demand action by policymakers. So gatekeeper is a hugely important role of the media. Sorry. Watchdog is investigative journalism. So scrutinize, investigate. Shout out to Mrs. Coakley, since I just saw that. Horse race journalism. So this is kind of with the scorekeeper role. This is the idea that the news media often just kind of is treating everything like it's a sport, like it's a race, keeping score. Oh, this is good for Trump. This is bad for Trump. This is good for Harris, bad for Harris. The polls today, she's up by 2 points. He's up by 1 point. So yeah. Political knowledge is affected by. So again, we kind of discussed this or mentioned it really briefly. So social media, that's what we're talking about with emerging technologies, reinforcing existing beliefs. So again, you just kind of get all your news from the same sources. You're over and over, bombarded with that same type of propaganda, and it might make you even more solidly of that ideology. And there are definitely questions. There are definitely questions about how credible or trustworthy news is. I saw somebody ask about whether we're more informed. There's questions about that, right? We have access to more information, but are we actually better informed is a very deep and good question. Mr. Clemens, shout out. Alexander, I don't know, who's that? I don't know. I'd have to scroll up, so I'm not going to see that. You guys going to manifest some 5s? I'm from Florida, bro. Come on. I know you might be spitting truth, but I'm flirting always. Amara says, can you go over narrowcasting real quick? Yeah. So that's like targeting your news to a certain audience. So MSNBC, they're not trying to get conservatives to watch them. They're targeting it to like liberal, college-educated liberals. That's who their target audience is. Fox News is targeting more conservative people from the heartland, people like in rural areas. So older people, like that's who they're targeting. So it's targeting your news to a specific audience. All right, last couple things. Shout out to Miss Smith, best AP Gov teacher. Florida, Mr. Smith, Mr. Hoover, Mr. Ahmed, Mr. Abarb. Are you going to do a big case review live stream? I'm not doing a case review live stream. They were in each of the units. So next is going to be FRQs. All right, Mr. Clay, Mr. Zane, Miss Molinaro. I don't believe that Mr. Santa Maria is a real one. Shout out Mr. Heimler. All right, Mr. Heimler. Never that sounds weird. Mr. Groff. Walt Whitman. Hi. Wow, that's Sounds very poetic. All right. Can you please say I love Ben Chuang? Lemon you. All right. You're not dead. Shout out Mr. Goodman. Saul, I suppose, right? Saul Goodman. All right, Mr. Taylor. He's Italian. Fiscal federalism is just federal giving money to the states and, making them do stuff. It's not true that I flew out of a van in either 2003 or 2004. You're trying to make me older than I am. I did fly out of a van, but it was not that early in life. Sorry about that. I know you're hoping. You're trying to make me older than I am, but I won't let you do that. All right. That's it for this one. We only have 25 minutes. We'll be right back together again. So I need to go get some energy, maybe eat something, close my eyes, maybe take a little power nap. I don't know what I'm going to do. We'll see. But we'll be back here in a few minutes, and that's going to be for FRQs, and I'll try to help you guys out in any way. So again, if you watch this, if you stuck with me to the end, then you got to hit that like button, because thank you so much. It's crazy. You were here with me for an hour and a half. Thank you guys so much. If I don't see you again in the next one, then I wish you all the best tomorrow on the AP exam, but hopefully I'll see you back here in about 20 minutes. So until then, what has this been again? I'm trying to remember. In the chat, this has been something. I know it's been something. What has this been? Mr. Blythe, Omar Ahmed, I'm the GOAT, Iron Triangles. Nobody knows what this has been. Man, it's hard to say. There we go. All right. Until next time, there's only one more of these coming. This has been a Money production. See you guys.